The scoreboard was still running a live match feed, 62,000 empty seats staring back at me under the floodlights. And someone in section 114, row 40, was clapping. Slow, deliberate claps. 3 at a time, then silence, then 3 more. I was standing at the tunnel entrance with my flashlight pointed straight at that section. And I want to be completely clear about this part, because it's the part nobody ever believes me on. There was nobody there. I could see every single row through binoculars from where I stood. Empty stadium, 2 in the morning, 4 days before our city's first World Cup match was set to kick off in 2026, and something in row 40 was clapping for a game that had ended 9 hours earlier. I'd worked stadium security for 6 years by that point. Concerts, playoff games, a papal visit once. I knew what an empty stadium at night sounded like, all its normal groans and settling and HVAC hum. This wasn't that. This had rhythm. This had intent. I called it in over the radio, my voice a lot steadier than I actually felt, and my supervisor Danny told me to walk up and check it myself before he'd dispatch anyone else, since we'd had 2 false alarms that same week from wind hitting loose paneling near the upper deck. I remember standing at the bottom of the section stairs for a solid 30 seconds, flashlight trained upward, waiting to see if the clapping would start again now that I was closer. It did. 3 claps, directly from row 40, and this time I heard something underneath it that I hadn't caught from the tunnel. A voice, low, almost conversational, saying something I couldn't make out, like someone commentating quietly to themselves on a match only they could see. I climbed those stairs anyway, because that's the job, and by the time I reached row 40, there was nothing there. Just a single seat, tipped slightly forward on its spring hinge, still swinging, ever so slightly, like someone had just stood up out of it. That was the first night. It was not the last. Let me back up a little. Our venue had been selected as a host stadium for the 2026 World Cup, and the months of renovations, new turf, expanded seating, a gutted broadcast wing, were some of the most exciting of my career. I'd been on overnight security for years, mostly quiet work. The construction crews practically lived in the building that spring. One of the supervisors, a guy named Ortiz who'd been doing stadium builds for almost 20 years, mentioned something odd during a shift changeover. His crew kept finding tools moved overnight in the lower bowl. Nothing stolen, just relocated, sometimes stacked into strange little pyramids nobody would admit to building. He laughed it off, called it stadium ghosts. I laughed along. I didn't think about it again for weeks. The clapping started about 10 days before opening night, right when the stadium sat fully complete and mostly empty overnight for the first time in months, waiting for the tournament to begin. After that first night in section 114, I didn't mention it beyond the radio call. Danny's tone made it clear he thought I'd let the 2 false alarms get in my head. I told myself the same. Old buildings make strange sounds. Wind does strange things in a bowl-shaped structure that size. I wanted an explanation that let me finish my shift and go home. 3 nights later, it happened again, except this time it wasn't just clapping. I was doing my usual 2 a.m. concourse walk when I heard, faintly at first, what sounded like a stadium chant, the kind fans do in unison, rhythmic and rising, coming from somewhere deep inside the bowl. My first reaction wasn't fear, it was confusion, because chants like that need dozens, sometimes hundreds of voices to sound full and layered. And I was standing in a building I knew was completely empty, except for one other guard, stationed at the opposite entrance. I radioed him. Felix, a guy I'd worked with for almost 3 years, about as unshakable as security guards come. He said he heard it too, coming from his side of the building as well, which didn't make sense given how far apart we were standing. The chant had a strange texture to it, a little thinner on the high end, like it was being squeezed through old speakers, and underneath it, almost swallowed, a faint rhythmic stamping that modern stadiums don't really produce anymore. We agreed to meet in the middle, at the tunnel leading out to the pitch, and by the time we got there, the chanting had stopped completely, replaced by a silence that somehow felt heavier than the noise had been. Felix stood there for a long moment, staring out at the pitch under the floodlights, and said quietly that it sounded exactly like the recordings he'd heard of old matches from stadiums that didn't exist anymore, torn down decades ago, chants preserved only in archival footage. I asked him what he meant. He said he didn't really know, that it was just the first thing his mind reached for, and he wished he hadn't said it out loud. We reported it together this time, and Danny didn't dismiss it quite as easily. He said he'd pull the overnight footage and review it himself. I remember feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that someone was taking it seriously, dread at what it might mean if the cameras actually caught something. The cameras caught nothing. Not literally nothing, which almost would have been easier to accept, but nothing unusual. An empty stadium sitting in silence for the entire overnight window. No clapping, no chanting audible on the audio track, nothing. Danny showed us the footage himself. I remember watching it and feeling a specific kind of dread that's hard to describe. The dread of knowing what you heard was real and having zero evidence to back it up. For the following week, things were quiet. Opening ceremonies came and went. Our stadium hosted its first 2 group stage matches without a single strange incident, and I genuinely started to believe whatever had happened was some acoustic anomaly during the odd in-between period after construction wrapped, but before the tournament fully began. Crowds, noise, thousands of people moving through the space. It felt like it had reset something, chased away whatever had been sitting in that empty bowl. Then came the night after our stadium's biggest group stage match, a sold-out fixture that went into extra time, the crowd noise loud enough I felt it in my chest. Everyone had gone home. Cleanup crews cleared out around midnight. By 1 a.m., it was just Felix, myself, and a new guard named Priya, only 2 weeks into the overnight rotation, and still learning the building's layout. Priya was the one who found it first. She radioed in, voice tight, saying she'd found something in the home team's locker room that she needed someone to see immediately. When Felix and I got there, she was standing in the doorway, refusing to go back in, pointing at the bench along the far wall. Every single jersey hanging on every hook had been turned inside out. All of them, neatly, deliberately, not torn down or thrown around, just carefully reversed, sleeves tucked the way you'd do if you were folding laundry with real care. Priya said she'd walked through on her routine check not 20 minutes earlier and everything had been normal. We checked every camera angle covering that room. All of them showed an empty locker room for the entire relevant window. No one entering, nothing moving, and then in the span of exactly one single dropped frame between 2 consecutive images, roughly 4 seconds apart, every jersey had flipped from right side out to inside out. Not a glitch repeated elsewhere in the system, just that one room, that one moment, gone and then already finished. I remember staring at those 2 stills, before and after, and trying to do the math in my head. How many hands would it take to flip 15 jerseys in 4 seconds? Could a human even move that fast? The fact that I was asking myself that question at all made me feel like I was losing something I couldn't afford to lose. Building management got involved after that, quietly, without any public statement. They brought in an outside technician to review the entire camera system for malfunctions. He found nothing wrong. He also, according to Felix, who overheard part of the conversation, mentioned almost in passing that he'd worked stadium security systems for over a decade, and this wasn't the first building he'd been called into under nearly identical circumstances. Always older or recently renovated venues, always during periods when the building sat unusually empty after unusually large crowds. He didn't elaborate. When Danny pushed him, he said it wasn't his place to speculate and left it at that. The final incident, the one that made me request a transfer off overnight rotation entirely, happened about 2 weeks later, during a rest day between matches, when the stadium was fully empty for almost 36 consecutive hours. The longest stretch of true quiet the building had experienced since the tournament began. I was alone that night. Felix out sick, Priya reassigned temporarily to a different venue. Around 3 a.m., doing my walkthrough of the upper concourse, I heard footsteps behind me. Not distant, close, matching my pace almost exactly, half a step behind, the way you'd walk if you were deliberately staying just out of someone's peripheral vision. The sound wasn't the usual echo of a security boot on polished concrete. It was softer, duller, like old leather soles on a floor that had been walked a million times. I turned around. Nothing. Empty concourse in both directions, security lighting casting long, even shadows down the corridor. Nowhere for anyone to have ducked out of sight that fast. I kept walking. The footsteps started again, almost immediately. Same pace, same distance. I didn't turn around a second time. I radioed the control room, told them I needed someone to physically walk with me back to the security office, and stayed on the line the entire way, narrating my position out loud like a lifeline. The footsteps never once stopped, never once caught up, staying exactly half a step behind me the whole length of that concourse. And somewhere in the last 100 yards, I became convinced of something I still can't logically explain, that there was a warmth just behind my right shoulder, like someone breathing in the exact rhythm of those steps. And I knew if I turned around now, I would see something that would make the rest of my life feel like a long walk back from one bad decision. The moment I stepped inside the office and closed the door, they stopped. Completely. Like whatever had been following me simply chose that specific threshold to give up. I requested the transfer the next morning. Danny didn't ask many questions, which told me more than anything he could have said directly. I found out later, through Felix, that at least 2 other overnight staff had made similar requests that same month, all quietly approved without much discussion. The tournament finished its run at our stadium without any incident visible to the public. Nothing during an actual match, only ever in that strange empty window after the crowds left and before the next day's setup crews arrived. I've talked to Felix about it many times since. Neither of us knows why it started right around the completion of construction, or why it seemed to prefer those long, empty overnight stretches, especially the ones immediately following the loudest, fullest crowds. Neither of us has ever figured out what that outside technician meant. I don't work overnight security anymore. I moved to a daytime events role not long after that final night on the concourse, and I've never told anyone outside a small handful of people the full details. Part of me still wonders whether it was ever really about the stadium at all, or whether it was something that had simply been waiting, patient and empty-handed, for exactly the kind of vast, echoing silence a brand new stadium creates in the hours after tens of thousands of people leave, and the building is finally, briefly, completely alone. I still think about that tipped seat in section 114, row 40, the first night this all started, swinging gently on its hinge like someone had just gotten up and walked away. Sometimes, when I have to go back into that building now, even during the day, even with hundreds of people around me, I find myself glancing up at that exact section out of habit. It's never moved since, not once, but I still look anyway, every single time, because some part of me has never quite believed that whatever was sitting there that night actually left for good. And sometimes, even in full daylight, I swear I can still feel that seat swinging, just the faintest push of air against my skin, like something had been there a moment ago and only now decided to go.